All right, welcome everyone. We have a special show for you tonight. We're going to be doing a live review of the Selkirk Amped Omni, and we are going to bring in a few minutes the man, Glen Peterson, the signature man. He actually has his signature right here. See that? Glen Peterson. What better person to get to talk about the Omni than Glen Peterson? Can't get anybody better than that. So Glen is going to join us in a few minutes. I'm just going to kick off the review here with a little music. A friend of mine, Kelly Thurman, he's been asking me to do some Hootie. So we're going to oblige Kelly. He's a good pal of mine. He's one of the best over 60-year-old players in the Atlanta area. And anybody that's come down here and played against Kelly, they know what I'm talking about. He's a fierce competitor. And this one's for you, Kelly. So let's get going. Here we go. Little Hootie for you. That song to keep going, don't you? It's hard to stop. Hard to stop when you get going with that song. All right. Hope you like that, Kelly. Tonight, the Omni with the man, Glen Peterson. Let's bring Glen in right now without further ado. Glen will be joining the broadcast in a few seconds here. There he is. Hey, Glen. How are you, buddy?
Hey, Jack. Good. Great intro.
Were you singing along?
I was trying. I wish I could strum along. I tried the guitar, but I've never succeeded.
Well, some people say I neither have either.
I think
it's
you're
fun.
doing well.
It's fun. It gives me. I have a captive audience, so I have to hold them captive for a few minutes while I have my fun. But let's get down to business now. Let's talk about the Selkirk amped model of the Omni. Now, you have to forgive me. I didn't give you your proper introduction. You are a member of Team Selkirk's Pro Elite. You're a 10-time U.S. Open gold medalist. You've won gold medals at nationals, at the Tournament of Champions. You have more gold medals. You have so many gold medals, you probably needed to build an extra addition onto your house just to store them all. So, very impressive resume you've racked up over the years. You're a terror for anybody over 50 that has to play you. And you're just a blessing to the sport. You're still playing singles. You're a great athlete. And I just appreciate very much you taking time to speak to us tonight.
Jack, thank you very, very much. Let me just say, in regards to that introduction, I consider myself a mediocre athlete, a high school tennis player who got into pickleball 5 years ago and happened to hit it at exactly the right time, because 5 years from now, I can tell you that the athletes who are at the top of the over 50 category, I won't be able to compete with them, and I wouldn't have been able to compete with them if they were alive today. So it's just a fantastic sport for me, and I happened to hit it at just the right time.
Well, hopefully the good folks at Selkirk with this technology that they're putting into their paddles now, it'll help you to stick around for a few more years and compete with these young guys.
Well, that's it. I'm looking, in paddles, I'm looking for any advantage that I can get. And you pointed out my signature on there. The deal I had with Rob and Mike Barnes was that it says in small print, signature design. It's not my play that got my name on this paddle. It's the fact that I designed a paddle, this paddle, that got my name on there. And whenever somebody beats me with this paddle, I remind them it's my design work. I'm an engineer by education. It's my design that got my name on there.
Okay, well, I mean, to me, if you have your name on a paddle, that means you're doing something right. That means you're a pretty good player. So,
well, thank you.
Let's talk about. Let me just give the folks the specs of the Omni. A lot of people are interested in what the specs are. It's 7.9 to 8.1 ounces. It's 7.25 inches wide, so it's a little more narrow than your typical 8-inch wide paddle. 16.25 inches in height, so it's quite a bit longer than your normal paddle, but not as long as some of the other long paddles. It's got a little shorter handle. The handle is 4.25 inches, and it's got the normal circumference handle 4.25 inches around. And it's got the new FiberFlex fiberglass surface. The core is what they call X5 polymer. It's a honeycomb core.
Right.
The typical vinyl edge guard, made in the good old USA, like all Selkirk paddles are. And it comes in a nice array of colors. You got the green, the blue, the red, and the orange. All beautiful graphics. I mean, the paddle really stands out on the court. You could spot these things right away. You see somebody playing with them. They're very sharp looking. So it's a nice. It's the cosmetic really nice. It looks. So Glenn, let me ask you about your involvement with the design of the Omni, and if you want to go back to the previous Omni and talk about how that came about and what you were playing with prior to the Omni.
I'd love to, Jack. Here's the previous Omni. This was introduced by Selkirk just prior to the U.S. Open in 2016. And this is a graphite paddle and with a polymer core, exactly the same dimensions in width and in length and in shape as the amped Omni.
Okay.
But,
so they kept
but lighter weight.
Same.
Yeah, it's lighter weight and it's 1/2-inch core instead of a 5/8 core.
Right. I'm glad you pointed that out. I forgot to mention the extra thickness, which is the feature of all of the Selkirk amped paddles. They give you that extra, what is it, like an extra 1/8 of an inch?
Yeah, it's an extra 1/8 of an inch, and that, when you think of a percentage, that's probably about 20%. So it's a significant increase in core thickness compared to the traditional core that's out there now, which is 1/2 inch.
Right. So what did you play with before you came to the Omni, the graphite Omni? Were you using something before that?
That's a great question. I played with every paddle that I got beat with. So I got into the pickleball
So you were
business.
searching.
I worked part-time for Pickleball Central, and the reason for that is every time I got beat by somebody, I would go down and buy that paddle and try it. So I've used a lot of the Paddle Tech paddles. I've used Selkirk. I use ProLite. I used many paddles before I started developing my own paddle.
That's interesting to hear, and I'm sure a lot of people out there, the average rec players, they probably got a little chuckle out of that because they probably do the same thing. You get beat by some guy, you go, what are you using? It must be something special that you got there. Right. And then you go and you try that paddle out. So you basically, you weren't set on anything before the first Omni came around. So did you work with Selkirk to design that first Omni?
Yeah. my paddle involvement was I developed this paddle called the Max 90, which I used 2 years ago in National, and it's the largest face paddle with a very short handle, and I got it approved through the USAPA. We never sold one, and then I sent this template to nearly every paddle company, and I worked with Rob Elliott. In fact, Rob Elliott came out with, a paddle that was almost exactly that template. He called it the GP paddle, which was my initials. In fact, Jody Elliott used this paddle in a tournament right after it was made. There's a diamond right there that she had on this paddle. She won a mixed doubles tournament with this paddle, but this was the first oversized paddle that was almost exactly the template of the Max 90 that I had developed. And then Selkirk, very shortly after that, came with this Omni paddle, which is almost identical, but it's slightly narrower, slightly longer, and a slightly longer handle. So this original handle was really short, and really like a ping pong handle, about 3 inches. But Selkirk added a little bit of length to the handle, and that allowed a whole lot more players to use it.
So was that, so you were kind of a pioneer with the longer paddles, is that right?
Well, in all fairness, Brian Jensen with the pop paddle,
Right.
So I used that paddle for a while. So he was the first with the longer paddle. My innovation was really about the shorter handle.
Okay.
And what I was finding, and let me illustrate this, is that here's a TS5 from Paddle Tech, is that because I was putting my finger and my thumb on the paddle like a table tennis grip.
Right.
I had about 2 inches of handle protruding below my hand. And that was a problem because I hit my leg, particularly in singles, I hit my leg on strokes. But I said, well, why not take that 2 inches and put it out in the length of the paddle?
Right, it's just weight space.
Yeah, in singles and in doubles, an extra inch in the end of a paddle makes a huge difference. It doesn't just give you additional reach. It actually, shifts the point at which the sweet spot from your wrist, if you think about from your wrist out to where the sweet spot is, it shifts it out, 10 to 20% further.
Gives you a little more leverage.
Yeah, leverage is a great term that I think of when I think of a longer paddle. You can hold the ball longer, even though that's not the intention. So the ball tends to stay on the face longer as the distance between my wrist and the sweet spot of the paddle grows.
Speaking of the handle, I tried. I'll be honest with you. I tried the graphite Omni. I was not crazy about it. I've been a Selkirk fan for a while. I've been using the their traditional shape paddles. When the amp stuff came out, I was using the S2 and I was very happy with it. But Selkirk sent me a whole bunch of demos, so let me try this Omni out for a while. And I couldn't believe how quickly I adapted to it and how much I loved it. And then when I went back to the S2, I found I was missing that extra inch, and I really felt like I wasn't giving anything up as far as the narrowness goes of it. But what I wanted to talk about was the handle. I feel like when your handle, now I don't do the ping pong grip like you do. I just do a traditional grip. So people out there that are worried that this is only for people with the ping pong grip, it's not true. I wear a size large glove, and you can see my hand fits on there just perfectly.
Yeah.
So, but what I find that gives me is more control. When my hand is right up against the paddle, it's closer to where I'm hitting the ball. So, naturally, if I was gripping the paddle down here, there's a longer distance to the sweet spot, which means it's harder to center the ball exactly on the sweet spot. The closer you get here, the more control you have. You know, just like a hammer. If you wanted to just really hit a little spot with it, you would grip that hammer way up high. You wouldn't hold it all the way down and hope to hit that spot. So my point is there's no wasted space, and that shorter handle actually, I feel, gives you more control over what the paddle face is doing. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think your explanation is exactly right. So I want more face, not less face. You know, it's not uncommon in a game for a ball to come off the back of my wrist, which means, you know, this is just like a shield, and I'm trying to block balls over. So I want additional paddle length. I want as much face as I can get, but I'm willing to accept the trade-off for more length for less width. And the reason for that is that, you know, when a ball strikes, you know, if I have a traditional paddle and a ball strikes this, you know, off the axis, center axis of the paddle tends to rotate. And so I don't get a consistent response. I get a much better response to the ball if it strikes somewhere along the axis of the paddle. So a paddle with a longer axis.
You're talking right along this.
If you think of this as the axis, you know, I get a longer axis, and so that whole axis is really a sweet spot for the paddle. So I'm willing to trade off a little bit of, you know, width in order to get a little bit more length. But in theory, I want the largest paddle face I can get.
Right.
So that you can block balls over.
And when you think about it, especially when you're blocking, you have the paddle in this position a lot more than you do in this position. So it makes sense to have more to work with, you know, horizontally. You're blocking, you know, like this. You're not doing as much, you know, the paddle is horizontal way more than it is vertical. So it makes sense to have more area to work with here. Now, let me ask you, you know, this new amp technology, what did you notice about it right away when you started trying out the new paddle versus the old graphite?
So I think I got the first amped technology paddle. It was just a white paddle in my shape that was 5/8 inch thick. And a couple of us hit with it. And the immediate feedback that you get is that the sweet spot feels larger. So when a ball is
that's because of the thickness.
Sorry?
Do you think that's because of the extra thickness?
Yeah, exactly. And my argument with Mike and Rob Barnes is that, you know, imagine a paddle that's an inch or two thick. In fact, I made it a 1 inch thick paddle. It was very crude and began to hit with it. And the paddle is more stable because it has more inertia. If you imagine a paper thin paddle, if the ball hits off center, it's going to move the paddle.
Right.
A thicker paddle has more inertia. Yes, it also has a little bit more weight, but that additional inertia resulted in what I felt was a much larger sweet spot. I wasn't looking for more power. I was looking for more control. And I was looking for a ball that came off more consistently, even when it hit off the sweet spot of the paddle.
Now, you know, coming from the graphite Omni, a lot of people, you know, they like the graphite because of the soft touch that you get around the kitchen. Nothing feels quite as soft as graphite. But my thing with graphite is, and I didn't realize this till a little bit later on, that I was not playing as well with the graphite paddles. Whenever I switched to composite paddles, my game picked up. And I think the reason for that was graphite is a little bit unforgiving. When you miss the sweet spot, you'll notice those mishits that just they go nowhere. The pros, they can hit the middle most of the time. So yeah, you get that nice soft feel with the graphite, but I think you pay a little bit of a price. And with this new technology, I think a lot of graphite lovers will like this soft feel, because one of the first things I noticed with the new amped paddles were just how soft they felt. I mean, as soon as you start hitting, you notice a difference. And I guess it's due to the extra thickness because it's absorbing more of the shot. The ball is sitting, like you said, it's sitting on the paddle a fraction of a second longer. And
Yeah.
I think that gives it the softer touch. And it's very comparable to the graphite in that respect.
Yeah, absorption is the right term, and yes, I think it gives you that touch that you had with graphite. The other thing I like about this, and Rob Elliott has pushed this very hard, is that with the fiberglass surface, which is fiberglass is generally heavier than graphite, so graphite allows paddle makers to make a lighter weight paddle, but with the fiberglass surface, there's a little more texture, and that texture, particularly with the Duraball, gives me a feel for the ball that I may not have with graphite. So I've come to prefer the fiberglass surface, particularly with the outdoor Dura ball.
Yeah, for sure. I try whenever I try paddles, I try to use different balls because unlike you, I'm subjected to whatever ball the tournament director is going to want us to use. So
Right.
I play with the Dura. I like the Dura the best, but sometimes I have to play with the Pure. Or if you're playing an indoor tournament, you have to play with the the jugs ball. And Selkirk claims that this paddle will bring those differences, make them smaller. So you're not seeing such a huge difference when you go from one ball to the other. And that's important to the average rec player who will use different balls maybe in the same week. You play indoors on Wednesday, you play outside on Thursday, you play a tournament on Saturday. You got all different balls coming at you, and it gets a little crazy. I mean, do you believe in keeping the same paddle for different balls, or are you of the school where you change paddles for the ball? Interesting question.
Yeah, I can't change paddles for different balls. If I would be using the graphite Omni for the jug. So I have this theory: heavier ball, heavier paddle; lighter ball, softer ball, lighter paddle. That seems to work for me. I don't know if that works for others, but I played yesterday with the Pure 2 Onyx ball using this paddle, and it felt great.
Oh, interesting.
So I'm comfortable, but I really want to only have one paddle so that I'm really comfortable with that paddle. And most of the big tournaments now are with Dura balls, whether outdoors or on tennis court surfaces indoors. And the Dura is doing well now. It did really well at nationals, and so I'm really wanting to stay close to that ball. And so when I play indoors now, I don't use jugs. I actually use the Onyx Pure 2 because the outdoor ball indoors because it's closer to the Dura.
Interesting.
Yeah.
When I review these paddles, I typically talk about how these things play. Now, the Omni, I find this more a control paddle as opposed to a power paddle. I think it's got a little bit about the same amount of power as the last Omni. If anybody is thinking of upgrading to this model, it may be a touch less, but there's something about these new amped paddles that give you the power when you put a swing on the ball.
Right.
And gives you the control at the same time. I know you hear this a lot. You get the power, you get the control. But I really think that they did it this time where they found a way to get both. And are you finding that as well? You get the power with the control?
Yeah, basically, I can always hit a ball as hard as I want. So I'm never looking for more power, but I'm always looking for more control. There are times at the net where you don't want to have to really wind up and you want that ball to come off, and it does for me. It comes off exactly. The additional leverage, if you will, reach, particularly for overheads, really helps me out. So you add 15% to that fulcrum or that leverage point, that really helps with the power. but I'm use it for both singles and doubles. I think the argument could be made that you ought to use a different paddle for singles than in doubles. I initially thought this was going to be a singles paddle. The additional reach when you're volleying in singles is worth a ton. But I instantly loved it for doubles because I wanted that reach and that, for doubles as well, plus that additional leverage, if you will.
Yeah, definitely. The thing that's really unique about this Omni, a lot of people, I always like to talk about what's unique about a certain paddle, why this one over the others. And obviously the shape, but this is like a hybrid paddle to me. It's not like like the Blade or the Maxima. I got the Maxima here. You can see you have a little bit more width here. It's kind of hard to pick up the camera, but it's noticeable when you play with it. To me, this plays like a conventional paddle. I don't really feel penalized when I'm using this when it comes to blocking, quick exchanges. I get that nice benefit of the overheads. I noticed that immediately that my overheads were much more effortless. And, the reach around the kitchen, you get to that little extra angle. You can block the ball back without having to cross over. You could, keep the ball in front of you better. But people that I think shy away from the narrow paddles because they think they're difficult to use, I really think they should give this one a try before they jump up to something like a Blade or a Maxima, because I really feel like this plays like a conventional paddle. I don't feel any penalty when I use this compared to a normal paddle.
Yeah, I think when you use the term hybrid, that's the right term. The Maxima is a very offensive paddle, so you don't want to be defending a lot. But I do a lot of defending. I block a lot of balls, but I want to block those balls as close to the axis as I can of the paddle. And so the additional length for me, again, that's a good trade-off. But I feel like I'm not losing really anything with a 7.5 inch versus an 8-inch width.
So you feel like the average player can benefit from this paddle? I mean, what do you think if just an average rec player said, how can I benefit from using this Omni paddle? Or what type of player would benefit from it most? What would you say?
There's thousands of players using these paddles now, and at all skill levels, and some grab the paddle with their finger on the face. So originally that was my idea, is that by having a finger or a thumb on the face of the paddle, I was getting more control of the face of the paddle, and I was aware of where that face was. So when you're hitting a ball at the kitchen, you really want to know where your paddle face is and what the orientation of that face is. And so the finger on the paddle was the original idea, and probably 3/4 or half of the players using an Omni have that finger up on the paddle. Lots of players on a conventional paddle have their finger on the paddle with a whole bunch of handles sticking out the bottom.
Makes no sense.
Yeah, but a lot of people, particularly women, are grabbing this paddle and not putting a finger on the face. And I'm even hitting a lot of ground strokes in singles without putting a finger on the face of this paddle. And I find that the handle is more than adequate for me. And I'm grabbing the handle the way I would a tennis racket. And I'm completely comfortable without putting a finger on the face of it. So I'm seeing all levels of players finding this paddle to be very, very comfortable with multiple styles of grips.
Right. So it's a very it can provide a lot of what's the word? It's very flexible. Like you said, it's great for guys that like to play singles and doubles. It'll work for both. You don't have to worry about transitioning between one or two paddles. One for singles, one for doubles. People that come from a table tennis background, that are used to holding it like that, this is the paddle you should try first before anything else. The other thing is I don't use the ping pong grip. I grip it normal, and
Right.
I think a lot of people when they first try it, they're a little bit put off by how small the handle feels because they're
Right.
used to having all that room, on the paddle. But what I say is give it some time, and after a day or two, it's not even going to be an issue anymore, and you're going to love the extra control you get when your hand is right up against the paddle face. You can really control what the tip is doing down here. So, I guess, so we talked about, what kind of players it's good for. It's pretty much, it could benefit a lot of different type of players. So my recommendation is to try it out, even if you're remotely interested in it, or you just might think, because it totally surprised me. I came from the S2, and I can't put this thing down now, and I think this is going to be the one for a while. So if I were to compare this to anything else, a lot of people like to compare. There's really nothing like this exactly on the market with this shape. There's really nothing. But the closest I can say, there's the Engage Elite Pro, which is a little bit longer and a little bit narrow. There's the Pro Light Rebel. It's also 6 inches long, a little bit longer, not quite as narrow, not quite as long. And then you have the paddle like the Maxima, which is definitely more narrow, a little bit longer. But this is really more of a single specialist type of paddle. You have to be very skilled to use this thing in doubles. A lot of pros will do it. Morgan Evans, obviously, his name's on there. He's got all kinds of crazy skill. He can probably play with a toothpick. But so my message is try it out. If you're even remotely interested in this type of paddle, you get a lot of benefits of the extra length, the extra inch or so, without really giving up much. So give it a try. Glenn, how has your play improved since you've switched over to the new amp? Have you seen any improvements in any areas, any shots that are more consistent now with the amp?
Yeah, my third shot and my kitchen dinks is where I feel way more comfortable with this paddle. So I'm getting a more consistent third shot drop into the kitchen, though, Scott Moore and sorry?
And who wouldn't want that? That's the most important shot in the game.
Yeah, there are times when it's not the paddle, I have to admit, Jack. So Scott and I got gold in the age at Nationals, but we didn't get gold this year in the Open. And so the paddle didn't do everything that I want it to do, but I think this 56-year-old body is part of the problem. My 87-year-old father plays 3 or 4 times a week, and he uses the Omni. When he doesn't hit a backhand, when he needs to reach, he reaches with his left hand. So he switches hands. Many players do that. So that extra inch, you'd say, well, what's the big deal? An extra inch. An extra inch can make a world of difference. I think about how many balls come off the tip of my paddle.
Right.
So the extra inch, when I play with my friends, we always joke about if I miss an overhead, I just need a longer paddle. So that extra inch makes a world of difference for players that are not as mobile.
Definitely.
Like me.
Go ahead.
Less mobile like me.
Right. Well, we all could use a little extra mobility at times. But let me see if you're willing. Could we see if anybody out there has a few interesting questions maybe you want to address?
Sure.
Okay. If there's people out there, I apologize if I missed earlier questions, but if you want to go ahead and retype them in, I'll try to get we'll try to get Glenn to answer a few questions. Let's see what we got here. Somebody asked, is this paddle better for singles or doubles? I think Glenn spoke about that already. He kind of was thinking that it was going to be for singles, but he liked it for both. So I think it's good for both. Don't you agree, Glenn?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see. How does this compare to the S1G Plus? Can the Omni be used in doubles? The S1G Plus I used quite extensively before. That's the graphite conventional paddle that Selkirk came out with. Those S1G and S1C, they also have that shorter handle, and they put a little more real estate down here. So they're similar to the Omni, but they're not as long, and they're a little bit wider. But the S1 Plus was a graphite paddle, and I would compare that more to the new Amped S2 with the new the new surface, the new FiberFlex surface. It doesn't really compare to the Omni. They're kind of different paddles, but the second part of the question, obviously, yes, the Omni can be used very effectively in doubles. Let's see, can you compare to the S2? I received my Monday, I love it. Struggling with my lobs. Some guy said he's struggling with his lobs. I guess he means with hitting his lobs or with putting away lobs. I struggle with my lobs, usually hitting it hard. I don't know. Don't you feel like every new paddle, the last thing to really dial in is the touch and the way you exactly dial in those shots like a lob, where a lob has to be placed perfectly. I think that's the last thing. I think he just needs to give it more time. What do you think?
Yeah, if he's saying that he's struggling with lobs with this paddle, maybe the only comment I'd make is that, when I picked up a tennis racket the other day, I was hitting all my balls at the throat of the racket because, I wasn't acclimated to the length. And so I mentally tell myself that the center spot is really out here. It's not the center of the paddle. And so if for lobs, you really want to think about trying to hit the ball right at the center of the S, which means it's moving out about an inch from where you would normally hit it with a standard shaped paddle.
Is that why they put this design where they did it? Because they want you to use this as a guide for the sweet spot?
I have no idea, but I can tell you that the sweet spot is in the center of that S from my own experience.
Okay. So somebody that comes to this paddle from a conventional paddle, you just want to aim a little bit further out, a little bit further towards the tip. And the other thing that I just thought of that I found with this paddle is when I'm hitting my third shot, you actually get a different feel when you hit a little bit closer to the throat.
Right.
And you can get a little more control that way, I think. Maybe if you hit it like around here. I don't know if you think that's a good idea or not, but on a third shot, I feel like you get more control when you hit it down here as opposed to up here. And it really helps me to dial it in a little better. I'm
going to try it next time I go out. That's a great thought. I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to try it.
Well, you said your third shot has been great. I don't want to mess it up and be responsible.
No.
But the point is, you get a different response down here, but it still comes off solid. It just feels a little more under control for shots like the drop shot than out here where you'd want to hit it for ground strokes or maybe for dinks. So when you have time to really pick and choose where you want to hit the ball. Maybe certain spots on the paddle give you a little extra control. Who knows? Let me know what you find.
I think that's a great comment. As you read the next question,
somebody's asking how fast is it at the net compared to a thinner and lighter paddle, such as the Head Extreme Tour. Glenn, I didn't find anything different about the extra thickness. It didn't feel more bulky. It didn't get in the way. How do you feel? How fast is this paddle at the net?
So I would have said 2 years ago that a lighter paddle is always a faster paddle, but a lighter paddle generally is not as powerful. So I'm trying to teach myself to take more compact, short strokes, and I'm getting all the power that I need. And so I'm not looking for speed. I'm looking to shorten my strokes. And there is a movement out there towards heavier paddles.
Because they'll do more with a little quick stroke.
Yeah, so we're seeing a lot more 8-ounce paddles. There's guys who have improvised with 12-ounce paddles and are playing really, really well with 9, 10, 11, 12-ounce paddles now.
Wow.
But, 8-ounce, I don't want to go much more than 8 ounces myself, because then I do feel like I lose some hand speed.
Yeah, I think I agree. There's a point where you're going to start to slow down with your blocking, and there's not a whole lot of benefit of a big heavy paddle. I mean, like you said, you get as much power as you need.
Right.
You don't want to be lugging a heavy paddle around, but I find that 8 ounces is just perfect. I think everybody out there could find something between 7 and 8 ounces that'll work for you. There's really no reason to go lower than that or to go higher than that. But so to answer that question, yeah, the paddle is quick at the net, even though it's a little heavier than the previous one. Is that right?
Yeah, this is about 8 ounces. The previous one was 7.3, 7.4.
Okay. So you didn't find any difficulty adjusting to that extra half ounce?
Yeah, and everybody has to be comfortable with the weight of the paddle. I don't want to diminish the importance of a player being comfortable with the weight. I tell people, when you buy a paddle, there's really 3 things. It's got to feel good in your hands, and it's got to feel good as you hit. So, which means the handle feels good. It feels good as you hit. The other thing is it's got to look good. You got to feel comfortable. I love the fact that this paddle is a little bit translucent. You can actually, see the sun through it a little bit. And I kind of love that. You can't see it now, but I love the fact that it's very slightly translucent. And then the third thing is it's got to sound good. So I close my eyes and hit a ball and say, does it sound solid? Some paddles sound tingy to me. And some people like that, but I just don't like that. But I've just become very comfortable with 8 ounces now. But I certainly understand people saying they don't, they want to be lighter or.
I'm glad you mentioned the sound. I forgot that's something I usually talk about, because believe it or not, if you look at golf clubs, Mizuno, for example, they've done a lot of research with the sound that the ball makes when the golf club hits it, with the perception in the person's head, how solid it feels. And that it translates to, when you feel like you've got a solid sounding paddle, you'll just play better. I mean, it may not make a difference, but it does make a difference. And the sound of the new Selkirks, the new amp series is more of a like a lower, kind of a lower sound, a little bit more muted, but it sounds very solid. It's got a nice sound.
Yeah.
And I'm like you. If I like everything paddle and I don't like the sound, I'll put it down. It's got to have all those key ingredients for me. So this one, has a nice sound to it. And let's do one more question, and then we'll let you go, Glenn. It's been very interesting, and I could talk to you all night, but I'm sure you don't want to do that. But let's do one more question, and then we'll let you go. How would you compare the sweet spot between the Omni and the S2? Would this slightly wider face of the S2 help more blocks, or is that difference negligible? You want to take that?
That's actually a very insightful question, and it's one that I think about, and it goes back to this. My conclusion is that I'm willing to trade off a sweet spot that's more elongated than one that's more square. But I believe that Will is correct in saying that an extra half inch of width or 3/4 is going to increase the sweet spot in this direction as for a defensive player. I believe that's an accurate statement. The sweet spot here gets a little longer in this direction, which is where I'm comfortable with. But I think it's a very insightful question and one that he's accurate in saying the S2 is going to have a bigger sweet spot in this direction.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is there's always a trade-off. If you go longer, you're going to lose something with the blocking. If you go more this way, you're going to lose reach. So that's why there's all different shapes of paddles, because there's not one perfect shape for everybody. And the good thing is Selkirk has done these amped paddles in 4 of their most popular shapes. So between those 4, I think anybody could find something that works for them. And it just comes down to what works best for your game. Like you said, if you're a defensive player and you're very interested in blocking everything back, go for the wider paddles. Go for the S2.
Right.
If you enjoy the extra length that the Omni or, this is kind of a hybrid, which I'm really liking this over the S2. So I think people just need to try them out and see how they work for their game. My ultimate paddle test is always, does this paddle allow me to play my best? And you know when your best is, when it's happening, when you're on. And if you have a paddle for a few weeks and that best play is not coming out, you can just forget it. You got to move on because, it's the Indian, not the arrow. But if the arrow is not letting the Indian be a full 100% Indian, then you got to get another arrow. So I tell everybody, if that paddle allows you to play your best more times than not, or more times than the other paddles, then that's the paddle for you. So you just got to try them out and see how it works for you. So Glenn, I want to say thank you so much for joining me here tonight. It was extremely interesting, especially to somebody like me who loves this kind of stuff. And I'm sure people out there are going to really enjoy it. If they missed it, the live feed, they'll catch the rerun. And thanks again for spending time with us. And good luck in the future, and keep beating those young kids.
Jack, thank you. This has been very fun.
All right, thanks a lot, Glenn. We'll see you on the courts. Take care.
All right.
Thanks for tuning in tonight.
Thank you.